The Refugee by K. A. Abbas. Khwaja Abbas Ahmad, popularly known as K. A. Abbas, was born in 1914 and died in 1987. He has been an Indian writer. His writings deal with pathos of oppressed people. He has been known as film director also. Naya Sansar and Avara were his very popular films. Thus, K. A. Abbas is known as film director, novelist, and journalist. He was awarded Padma Shri also by the government of India. And the refugee story deals with the characters of two ladies. These are both old women. One is Mazi, who was Hindu, Sikh, and Amma, a Muslim woman. During partition, Hindustan and Pakistan, she came from Rawalpindi, part of Pakistan, and she comes to India and first to Delhi and then she is taken to Bombay. And Amma from Panipat and she is taken from here to Delhi then to Bombay just because of the riots during the partition. And luckily or by chance they reach the same day at Bombay and she is the mother of K. A. Abbas, I mean the writer's mother, and through writer we come to know the suffering of the people who got migrated and Mazi, and the same fate was of Amma also. So let's see what's more about in the story. This story talks about the horrible events happened during the partition of India and Pakistan in 1947. During partition, nearly 10 million people were uprooted from their home and family, who were migrated as refugees from Pakistan to India and vice versa, because many went from Hindustan to Pakistan also. Their sufferings have been shown through the life of an old mother known as Mazi, who migrated from Rawalpindi, Pakistan to India. Now let's read the story. The refugee, they are talking about the partition and they are referring to the tragic storm of August September 1947. Actually, this time this like a storm started the partition when governments declared that who want to go to Pakistan they may go and those who want to come to Hindustan they may come. The tragic storm of August September 1947 blew away nearly 10 million people. 10 million means 1 crore. Like autumn leaves from one end of the country to the other. From Delhi to Karachi, from Karachi to Bombay, from Lahore to Delhi, from Rawalpindi to Agra, from Noakhali to Calcutta, from Calcutta to Dhaka, from Lyalpur to Panipat, from Panipat to Montgomery. The 1,000-year-old joint family system was shattered beyond repair. Age-old friends and neighbors were ruthlessly separated. Brother was torn away from brother. Uprooted from their ancestral homes, millions found themselves driven to strange and alien soil. In October of that year of sorrowful memories, this very storm blew two week-old women into Bombay, hundreds of miles away from their respective hometowns. One of them was my own mother, and the other was the mother of a Sikh friend and neighbor of mine. One had come from the East Punjab and the other from the West Punjab, one from Panipat and the other from Rawalpindi. By a strange chance, they reached Bombay on the same day. My mother, along with other women and children of my family, was evacuated from Panipat in a military truck and brought to Delhi. She stayed there for 3 weeks, crowded in a small room with the two other families, and then came to Bombay by plane because it was still unsafe to travel by train. My friend's mother, along with her old husband, came in a refugee caravan from Pindi to Amritsar, from there to a refugee camp in Delhi, and finally from there to Bombay. I called my mother Amma and my friend called his mother Maji. When both of them arrived here, I discovered that that was about the only difference between these two old women. Mazi used to live in Rawalpindi in her own house. It was a double storied building. She told me one day. She occupied the upper floor, while down below on the ground floor were shops, mostly tenanted by Muslim shopkeepers or artisans. Many of her neighbors too were Muslims. There was a close bond of good neighborliness between all of them, Muslim or Hindu or Sikh. The Muslim women of the neighborhood called the old Sardarni Behenji, while the younger ones respectfully addressed her as Mazi or Chachi. That was the pattern of living not only in that neighborhood, not only in Rawalpindi, but all over the Punjab. The town of Rawalpindi was the whole world for Maji. She had never been elsewhere. Her son worked first in Lahore, then in Calcutta, and finally in Bombay. But to Maji, these cities belonged to another, far off world. If she had her way, she would never have allowed her son to go far from home. She often argued with him, "What's the use of earning money, my son, when in those cities you get neither pure milk nor ghee, neither apricots nor peaches, neither grapes nor apples and bagugoshas? Why? In the city, they don't even know what that is. At home, they had a buffalo of their own, giving no less than 10 seers of milk every day. After churning the curds to take out butter, she would distribute the buttermilk to the whole neighborhood. Everyone would thank her and say, "May your son live 1,000 years, Mazi," but that would remind her of her son eating hotel food in a city, and that would make her sad. Not far from Pindi, they had a bit of their own land leased to some farmers. Twice a year, at harvest time, they would get their share of the produce, wheat or maize or bajra. Milk and butter and ghee were, of course, available at home. Then there was a small but steady income from the rent of the shops. And thus they lived, a contented old couple, at peace with themselves, their neighbors, and their God. When in June 1947 the newspapers published the news of the impending partition, it did not alarm or even worry Mazi or the old Sardarji. Politics, they always thought, was no concern of peaceful folk like them. Whether the country was called Hindustan or Pakistan, what did it matter? Their concern was only with their neighbors, and with them their relations had always been friendly, even cordial. There had been intercommunal rights in the past. It was a fever of the mind, sun, which seized the people now and then, but never had they been involved in any unpleasant incident. This time the fire of hate and violence raged more fiercely than ever before. But even then Mazi was sure that it would soon cool off. Her son wrote from Bombay asking them to come there, but Mazi would not agree to abandon her beloved Rawalpindi. Many of her relations and Sikh and Hindu neighbors went away to East Punjab, but she stayed on in her house. Whenever anyone said that it was dangerous for Sikhs to live in West Punjab, she would say, "Who will harass us here?" The situation in Pindi became increasingly dangerous for Hindus and Sikhs, and some of Mazi's own Muslim neighbors came to her and pleaded with her to go away to a place of safety. And yet there were some who reassured her and promised that they would protect her life, honor, and property with their own lives. In particular, the old lady remembers the royal devotion of a Muslim tailor, a tenant of theirs, who kept watch night and day on their house. May he live long, she always blesses him. He truly helped us and saved us like a real son. Some of the refugees from the East Punjab were staying in their neighborhood. Mazi was so moved by their pitiable condition that she voluntarily sent them donations of foodstuffs, clothes, blankets, and bedding. And it never occurred to her that they were Muslims, supposed to be the enemies of her people, and so she ought not to help them. Nor did she imagine that soon she too would be in a plight very similar to theirs. Then something happened that snapped the last thread of her faith. On the road in front of her house, a Tongawala was stabbed to death. This is how Mazi described the frightful incident and her own feelings to it. Son, it was bad enough that the Tongawala was killed. They killed him because he was a Hindu, but they did not spare even the horse. You know, a horse has neither religion nor caste, and yet they went on stabbing the poor animal with their daggers till the poor dumb creature bled to death. Then I knew the madness had gone too far, and human beings had become something else, something horrible and evil, that we could no longer feel safe in Rawalpindi. And so she locked up her house, leaving everything behind just as it was. She still did not imagine that she was abandoning her hearth and home forever. The prevalent madness, she hoped, would blow over one day and then she would return home. But by the time we reached Delhi, she said with a sigh, my old eyes saw things, horrible things, both there and here, that told us that we could never again go to Pindi. By the time they reached Bombay, the memory of her home in Rawalpindi was only a pain in her aged heart. In Rawalpindi, she used to live in a house with six spacious rooms, wide verandas, and a big courtyard. In Bombay, she and her husband lived with their son in a single room tenement, with a dhobi occupying the room on one side and a coal shop on the other. There is a small kitchen which also serves as dining room, bathroom, and storeroom. When my friend lived there alone, the room was always in a mess. Books, newspapers, dirty linen, and unwashed teacups lying about everywhere. But anyone who visits the same place now finds it completely changed. Within its narrow limits, everything is spotlessly clean, well arranged. There are white sheets on the beds with embroidered pillowcases. The floor shines with constant scrubbing, and there is not a particle of dust or dirt anywhere. In Rawalpindi, Mazi had two male servants and a maid servant. Here she cooks with her own hands, washes the dishes, sweeps the floor. But she has a maternal smile and a pleasant smile for any friend of her son who happens to drop in, and of course, she would never let anyone go away without eating something or at least taking a cup of tea. Mazi has lost her hearth and home, all her life's savings and possessions. From a prosperous landlady in Rawalpindi, she has become a refugee in Bombay, but her hospitality has not lost its North Indian flavor and fervor. Mazi has a fair complexion, a rather short stature, and frail body. Her hair, which was already grey, has turned almost completely white since after the partition, and her health is not so good. She gets attacks of asthma and neuralgia, but she never sits idle for a moment, never relaxes or sleeps except for 6 hours at night. First to get up in the morning, last to go to sleep. Throughout the day, she is constantly working. Whether it is cooking for her son, or darning and mending her husband's old clothes, or making tea or lassi for a guest, she insists on doing everything with her own hands. Seeing her, you would never imagine that she is a refugee who lost and suffered so much. She never proclaims her tragedy. She never curses or abuses those who made her leave her home. She still remembers her Muslim neighbors with affection and brightens up whenever her husband reads out a letter received from Rawalpindi. Only very occasionally a soft, cold sigh escapes her lips as she says, "Your Bombay may be a great and grand city, son, but we can never forget our Rawalpindi. Those pears and apricots and apples, those grapes and melons and bagugoshas that you never get in Bombay." And suddenly she is silent, tears bubbling up in her tired old eyes. And it seems that in her intensely human heart of this refugee, there is neither anger nor self pity, but only memories. Memories that are soft like ripe apricots and fragrant like bagugoshas. Thank you.